Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Captain Hunter's podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I really appreciate, once again, as I say all the time, the love and the support that you all have been giving. Thank you so much. Today's episode is a good one. We got a fellow podcaster by the name of Cynthia Wright. She hosts the podcast called Getting Your Ish Together. I try not to swear on this podcast because I want it to be family friendly. I want people to be able to have your kids listen in and make sure that your children are able to listen to this because they may want to become police officers one day. So that's the reason that I don't swear, or at least I try not to swear. So her podcast is called Getting Your Ish Together, and the author is Cynthia Wright. So we'll get into the episode in just a few moments, but as we always do, let's get through the housekeeping items. The housekeeping, of course, is that you please help support the podcast through Venmo, through Cash App, through PayPal, or you can go to the Patreon page, Captain Hunter's Podcast on Patreon, and support. Remember, it costs money to put these episodes up every week. I have to pay for the storage. I bought and plan to buy more equipment to make sure that the podcast for you is bigger and better. Starting in 2020, I'm going to have some items that are going to be for sale, some t-shirts for Captain Hunter's Podcast. I'm going to have some mugs where you can go on the website and buy items for Captain Hunter's Podcast. So be on the lookout for that. Just all in support, trying to support the podcast and make sure that the podcast is growing, advertisement, marketing, and all that kind of stuff. So just be a supporter and be on the lookout for those items. Remember to subscribe, rate, and share these episodes. Share it with your friends, share it with your neighbors, share it through email. You can make clips of the episodes, put it together, put it on your own Facebook page, send it through an email. Please make sure that you rate, subscribe, and that you share. That way it's easier for me to be found. And most importantly is the sharing option. Please make sure that you are telling your friends, telling a neighbor, and getting the word out about what Captain Hunter's Podcast is all about. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for paying attention to the good housekeeping. Now back to the show. So I went to a drug reform conference in St. Louis, Missouri, a few weeks ago at the beginning of November 2019. And it was very informative, very enlightening. I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about addiction. But prior to me actually going to the particular venue in St. Louis, I met Miss Cynthia Wright through a Facebook group for fellow podcasters. And this particular group, she and I hooked up, and I thought that her story was really good and really great. The premise of her show, Getting Your Ish Together, is about people who have or are dealing with addiction. Now, Miss Wright is very open and honest about her addiction. She's going to talk about it on the show. So therefore, I don't have any qualms about talking about it right now. But her addiction and her drug of choice was alcohol. So some people are hooked on the more harder drugs, heroin, cocaine, etc., etc., etc. Miss Wright's drug of choice was alcohol. And you will learn that she is college educated and that she developed her addiction in her 30s, right? So this is not something that people develop, when they're a teenager, not just something that people develop when they're teenagers or in their early 20s, but in her 30s, she developed this drug addiction. And it's very interesting to see that even though her family and her friends, even other professionals, her doctor and all that, told her about herself and told her about her addictions, it's only when she decided to get clean and sober that she actually made the steps and efforts to get clean and sober. So I congratulate her on her steps to get clean and sober, and it's about a lot of times just waiting for that person to be ready. It doesn't matter when you're a family member or a family friend of someone who is suffering from addiction. You can cry, you can whine, you can complain, you can admonish, you can warn, you can scold, you can yell, scream to the top of your lungs. But it's not until the person who's actually ready to face their demons that they will actually do something about it. And that was the case with Miss Cynthia Wright. So I think her story is a good one. So we're going to deal with addiction, and we're going to deal with addiction in a number of ways in the next few coming episodes. Yes, I have other episodes that are going to deal with addiction and people who are trying to get people off of addiction. We're going to talk about harm reduction, and essentially harm reduction is allowing people to go through their addictive process, if you will, or allowing them to engage in certain behaviors while loving them, and understanding that they can't change or they won't change until they are actually ready. So those are future episodes that are going to be coming up. I still have a lot of episodes that are recorded about other topics as well. And I'm still looking for guests on a wide variety of topics. In fact, truth be told, I'm looking to expand the show and to talk more about law enforcement. I want to talk about the whole person, right? So because the premise of the show is bridging the gap or bridging the divide between the police and the communities that they serve. Well, I want to focus more on the communities. And I believe that in order to have strong communities, that you need to have strong families, strong community centers. That would be churches, religious organizations. That would be strong fraternities, strong sororities, strong civic organizations, and things like that. And that will produce strong communities. So strong families, strong civic and religious organizations. And that means that you have to be strong as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in another episode. And so stay tuned for all that. So a lot of expanding is going to be going on with Captain Hunter's podcast. Yes, we're going to focus on law enforcement. Yes, we're going to look at the items that are going on around law enforcement, how we can make law enforcement better. But we have to have strong. Not only do we need strong law enforcement officials who are part and members of the community, but we also need strong community members. And that, once again, is about strong families, strong civic organizations, and strong individuals in those families. Strong fathers in the home, strong mothers in the home. And yes, I said it, strong fathers need to be in the home. And yes, I'm saying it, strong mothers need to be in the home. Strong family units, a whole, well-rounded people. And we're going to talk about that when we're going to get into that. Financial literacy people who are going to be coming on, and just a whole host of other options and people that we're going to be exploring and dealing with getting all of our stuff together. In short, as Miss Cynthia Wright is saying, getting all of our ish together. We're going to get our ish together and we're going to build up our community. So without further ado, here's a little bit about Miss Cynthia Wright. After deciding to get sober in 2019, Cynthia decided to live life on her terms and crush stigmas associated with addiction and addictive behavior. Thus, her podcast, Getting Your Ish Together, was born, where she dishes it up every week on topics ranging from leveling up, guilt and shame and acceptance, all types of toxic relationships and how they impact your life. She talks about eating disorders and the random Q&A from her audience. New episodes drop every Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. She's still working on and building her website, but you can find her podcast, Getting Your Ish Together, on iTunes, Pandora. You can listen on Buzzsprout, and you can also listen to it on SoundCloud. It's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Getting Your Ish Together. Now, when I say getting your ish together, the actual spelling of it is getting space your SH star T together. That's how you say it. I'm saying ish, but it's really getting your shit together. So getting your ish together. So that's a little bit about Miss Cynthia Wright. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, here is the interview with Miss Cynthia Wright. We're talking with Cynthia Wright. Thank you so much for being on Captain Hunter's podcast. You are the host of the podcast, Getting Your Ish Together, right?
Yes, that is correct. And thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you so much for being here. So let's just start off with, how did you get the name, or how did you develop the name for your podcast?
You know, it's actually kind of funny. A similar question. I'm a member of a Women of Color podcasters circle. And one of the questions for October was like, how did you come up with your name? And which actually answered today. So it's kind of like full circle. That was in the morning and now it's night. But simply put, I suck at names. Like, I suck at naming things. I do a lot of other creative things like write, and I'm horrible with naming characters. Like, it's just not something I'm really great at. And I was saying, I was going to start a podcast for so many years now. And I was talking to my best friend, and we were like going back and forth on names because she's really good at naming things. And I was like, well, I'm trying to do this podcast, and it's about, like, you know, getting your ish together, right? And I feel like maybe that should just be my name. She's like, I like that name, so why not make it that name? And I was like, okay, bet. And I said, I guess that's just going to be the name of my podcast. So from that day forth, it's been called that ever since. I was trying to like think about, I know it has like a swear word in it, but I was trying to figure out like, well, I didn't want it to sound too aggressive, but then I also wanted to be kind of to the point. So I was like, and I'm not trying, I didn't know at the time, like, I don't know how big I want this podcast to be. I was just trying to get my story out to talk through things and meet other people, maybe connect, but I wasn't thinking, oh, it's going to be like this huge popular podcast. So I'm like, I'm just going to go with it. So, and the more that I've been podcasting, I think it kind of fits like my personality and the brand a little. So it's kind of grown on me. So,
very nice. People out there may not realize how difficult it is to come up with a name for your podcast. It is hard. I struggle with the name of mine. I mean, it may seem very simple, but I was going back and forth with a bunch of different names. And then I just dropped an episode. And then I had a friend of mine listen to it. He's like, okay, yeah, we'll just call it Captain Hunter's Podcast. What's wrong with that? I'm like, okay, all right. So sometimes the simplest thing that comes to mind, works, but we don't think so. We're looking for something elaborate that's going to grab the attention. So I certainly understand that. Yeah.
And so, what do you think about like, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And you have to think about it. Like, this is going to be everywhere. So once you start putting your stuff out there, like change it at the last minute. Like you have to change. It's not just like changing your logo. It's like changing in 50 million places. So it's like you either have a name that sticks and that you feel comfortable, using or throwing out there, because you don't want to feel like, I'm not that crazy about the name. But anyway, I know that's not the topic. I could go on and on about branding.
No, listen, we're talking about whatever you want to talk about. That's totally fine. And that's what you do, right? Let's get off topic for a minute here. So that's what you do, right? Yeah. You're an advertising marketing specialist or something?
I am. I'm a project manager. I work in advertising. I've been a project manager since college, which has been a long, long, long time, even though I don't really think about my age, which is, I guess, both good and bad. I don't know. But I do. I work in a lot of, I've helped brand a lot of different things. I think strategically about it, but it's so funny that I can do it for other people and other corporations, but I can't do it for myself. It's like, maybe it's too close to me. So I can't say like, because then I'll talk to somebody else. I'm like, well, have you ever tried, a giveaway? And I'm like, yeah, I've recommended that to people before, but I don't know why it's not dawning on myself to like do that for my own business. It's like the weirdest thing. It's like a disconnect somewhere.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I wonder why that is. I'm sure that there's some psychological reason, and I have a degree in psychology, so I should know that, but I don't. So,
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, and before, we're going to get into what your podcast is about, which is, Getting Your Ish Together is about dealing with addiction, recovery from addiction, but just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Cynthia Wright, or you mentioned before, but I'm in my 30s. I live in Brooklyn, New York now. I've been here for quite some time. I don't remember when I first moved here. I work in advertising. I am not married, don't have kids. Let's see. It's like one of these questions that always make me stumble, because it's like, what do people really want to know about me? I write. I'm very much of a creative person. Even though my full-time career even though I work in a creative industry, it's not really that creative. It's very operational, very functional, which I kind of like. But in my day-to-day, I'm a photographer, writer, podcaster now. Dance. I like to dance. So it's like I do a lot of things that are creative to like express myself. And I do something about me. I've realized it's like I do a lot of things like that visually or verbally, or like through, I guess, body movement, because when it comes to me having to verbally say things, it's harder. I'm learning, because just this process of, I know we'll get into it, of just being able to express myself. Like, it's harder for me to do it in a verbal way, but I can write it down. I can I can take a photo and like get a feeling off of that, or I can like, I'm learning to also get in comfort or become more comfortable expressing it like through my body and stuff like that. Just because I just didn't talk about my feelings or understand my feelings or want to get into how I was feeling for so many years, probably most of my life actually, which is why I ended up probably in the situations that I ended up with. And so it all comes full circle, but I'm learning about a lot of that stuff now. 2019 has been an interesting year for sure.
So I see. So once again, let me thank you for coming on the podcast. Now, I know that your story as far as recovering from addiction, and that's what this episode is about, recovering from addiction. I want to thank you for, number one, coming on the show. Number two, talking about it in your podcast. That's how I found out about you, is through one of the Facebook groups that you and I are both a part of. You talked about your podcast, and that's how we hooked up. So let's talk about your addiction and go back into what your addiction is and how you developed this addiction, for lack of a better term.
So I always find it interesting, because I don't think a lot of people view like addiction or anything like that as like, oh, it's, you just come out the gate. That's, you just have an addictive personality. That's it. That's the type of thing. It's just big focuses and you go in one direction or the other. I feel like a lot of people don't want to discuss about all like the underlying stuff, right? Because a lot of people have clear addiction or addict or anything like that, and automatically like red flags and alarms go off in your head, which I get, I had that too. And it was until I really just started looking at my life and things that have happened throughout the course of my life. And it's sort of like, I feel like a lot of people have stuff that happens to them. Like nobody's life is perfect, but it also has to do with like, how do you cope? How were you socialized? How were you raised to be able to handle adversity or, handle, things, people feeling different, or, were you supported? Were you nurtured? Were you all this other type of stuff growing up? And it's not like to like crap or dump on my parents or anything like that. Love my parents. They did the best they could with what they had, but they had an element of trauma in their background too. And if you're not self-aware, that stuff is generational. It happens, it can easily bleed over into something else. So I think for me, I just grew up within a lot of like trauma. Like I had a lot of it, and it wasn't like a physical thing, but it was a lot of it. And I think now it's starting to become more well known about how it is like emotional stuff can be as damaging, if not more so, than physical stuff.
Right.
It's not apple. You can't compare it, but it is still something that can really impact you, not just like that day, but for years. And I think for me, a lot of that is true in my case. And then I wasn't raised in a family that I could talk or express anything. So, like for example, my dad's in the military. I was in the military. He retired. So we moved around a lot. So I was used to being around people that weren't like me. And I liked that. But then when we came back to the States, my parents were like, we're going to put you in like, to them, like all white school districts and everything like that. That was better. You'll get better education. So we're going to put you there. And I would get tested and put in all these AP classes. And I'm the only Black girl there. Also because so it was like, I'm the only Black person there in a mostly white school. I'm not thin at all. How I talk. So I would get like any which way, like, someone would be like, well, you sound different. Why do you know about that? Why are you here? Look at you, and then I would come home and I try to explain it to my parents, but they didn't understand it, and my brother was kind of like on the popular side. And then it was sort of like, okay, what do I do? So then I was sort of like, I can't control how I talk. Really, I tried. My skin tone, I can't. So I was like, well, let me try to fix my body. Like, so I would do a lot of things like I had an eating disorder at a young age. I had an eating disorder starting in the fourth grade.
In the fourth grade, you said? Fourth?
Yeah, fourth grade, yeah. But to me, I was just doing stuff. But now, like, going back and working with like my therapist, they're like, you do realize like that's what you were doing. And I'm like, okay. But it's sort of like, but if you want to pinpoint like my personality when it comes to like addictive behavior, could start there, because it's all about really changing your present moment or your present day or how you view your life. You know, you're altering it in some way. And I feel like I've been doing that since I can remember. I can't even remember a time when I didn't, you know, because it's just been part of my life, whether it was food, it could have been, and then it morphed into like alcohol, but it didn't really go further past that. But I also knew at that time, like, you know, I couldn't venture down that road because who knows where I would go with that because of just how I thought. And then I also had that weird sense of maybe superiority, sort of like, oh, those are the people that are really addicted, the people that do hard drugs. Like, I'm not that. I can control what I'm doing.
I'm sorry, you had a sense of superiority because you were just drinking and you weren't doing the hard drugs, so you looked down on people who were doing the hard drugs.
Yeah, because I was like, oh, they're out of control. You know, look at that. Like, they're going to waste all this money. They're going to waste all their time. They are stealing from their friends. It was like this really weird, like, dynamic. Because I was like, oh, no, this is legal. I can do this. I can stop anytime I want to, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, in reality, you know, looking back now, I mean, some of the stories that I would tell people, they're like, you did what? And I was like, yeah, you don't have a crazy story like that? And sometimes some people would, but most of the time they didn't. And I was like, well, that's interesting. But I was like, but in my mind, I was like, well, I'm not doing cocaine. I'm not on heroin. I'm not doing opioids. I'm not doing any of that. Those that's addictive. That's active behavior. That's destroying your life. I'm different. But in reality, no, it's really not.
No,
you can destroy your life on anything.
True. So what I found interesting about what you were saying is that you had an eating disorder in the 4th grade, which is about age 10, right?
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
I mean, I don't know. How did I deal with that? I mean, I just remember, you know, I stole money from my mom to actually buy diet pills, right? And they sold them to me. Like, I remember this, like it was yesterday, you know, and I was 10-ish or wherever around there. And I was like, I still look like a kid, and you're not supposed to sell those things to kids, but the woman sold them to me. So I was like on diet pills. I would, not eat. Like, so I would starve myself.
Wow.
Pretty extensively. I would work out for like hours on end. And it's just this like period of like from 4th grade on to like college, maybe. Like, I was kind of like fluctuating on and off with this. And my parents knew, I would assume, but they just never said anything.
So your eating disorder was bulimia or anorexia or what?
I would say it was definitely more on the bulimic side.
Wow. And did your parents know that you were bulimic? I assumed that you were eating and then throwing up. Did they know you were doing that?
Or I would eat a lot or work out for like hours and hours, like 4 to 6. It was like craziness that I would do. And I think they knew, but they didn't know what to do, you know? And I used to be like, well, why don't you just say something? But my family doesn't do that. Like, we will be, and I don't know if I don't know. I feel like, you know, it's just how my parents were raised and then how me and my brother ended up getting raised. And now I'm trying to like work on breaking that pattern. But we could see something and we could be like, this is bad all day, and just not talk about it.
So that's almost a trauma on top of trauma, right? So you go to school in the 4th grade, going to school, dealing with skinnier girls, and you don't know how to cope with it. You talk to your parents, they don't know how to deal with it. Now you're working out, taking diet pills. Your parents still can't deal with it. So this is a nexus of all this trauma that you're talking about, I would assume.
Yeah, there's a lot of trauma. And it's like, me and my mom had a very adversarial type of relationship, you know. not adversarial, like we got along, but I always felt that she preferred my brother to me. You know, she was really close to her brother growing up, and she was more comfortable around male energy than female. And I was a inquisitive child. Like, I asked a lot of questions, and I'm curious. I'm still like that. I ask a lot of questions. I'm curious about the world because I find it so fascinating, interesting. How can you not ask questions? That can drive a lot of people crazy, I know. So I have to tailor it. But and then she lost her mom at a young age, and I think my mom passed away. She passed away from cancer when I was 23. But one of the things she told me when she was dying was that she's like, because after a certain period of time, like my mom, well, there's a lot of things. So there's another trauma, because I don't know if you've gotten thus far in my podcast, but I identify as queer, right? So during your teenage years is when you start questioning things, right, about yourself. And my mom found my diary about questioning myself, and then I was angry at her, you know, because as teenagers, you're angry. You just write stuff down. She read it and was really hurt by it, shared it with my entire family. Like, my brother read it, my dad read it. It was like this whole thing. But she didn't talk to me for like a year based off this. So, like, just stopped talking to me, didn't acknowledge me, nothing for like a full year. This was when I was like 16. And it was like dealing with that, and then me questioning myself, and then feeling like I couldn't talk to my dad because my dad's like, you know, he's from the military. He's really religious and he's Southern. So it's like, at that time, he was not for any of that at all. So he wasn't necessarily going to be on my side. Chris, as my brother, he wouldn't necessarily care. So just feeling like alone a lot. Like, I just remember feeling constantly alone a lot growing up, and that I wasn't understood or loved or cared for. And it wasn't, but it's like I was cared for in the sense like I had a roof over my head, you know. So it's like I see that, you know, not everybody has that, but just as me as a person, and like cultivating, like me knowing what I like and boundaries and things like that, like none of that. I was, you know, provided none of that growing up as a child, and that kind of impacts a lot about how you see yourself, how you see the world around you, what you're willing to let happen to you. And it's just something that, you know, I mean, looking back at my life, because I'm in therapy, and been in therapy for years now. Looking back at it, it's like, well, no wonder I kind of coped in the way that I did. Not saying it makes it right, but it's like, it's not surprising, you know, because I didn't know how to handle any of that stuff. So I just kind of numbed it the best way I could. So if it wasn't food, it was something else. And, you know.
Wow. That's
some of better than the other, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's really something. So your mother was, your father, you said, was very religious. Was your mother religious as well?
No, not at all.
Wow. So why do you think that she was so against your queerness?
I think she just didn't know what to. I feel like, I don't know if you're a parent, but I feel, and I'm not, so I can only speculate, but I just think you have an idea of how you want your child to be, you know, and I think whether you mean for that to be true or not, I just think you do, because you gave birth to this person. You kind of want them to be like this. And I think for my mom, I was not what she expected,
right?
You know?
Yeah.
And I think, like, I didn't need her. Like, you know, my brother needed her, because my brother's kind of a mama's boy. There's nothing wrong with that. He really loved my mom. But I was very independent and like trying to figure things out on my own. And it's like, she didn't feel like I needed her in that way, which is funny. You know, my dad actually said that to me one time, like, your mom didn't feel like you. And I'm sitting there like, when I'm a kid, I didn't know anything. How can you say I didn't need her? Like, you know, how else am I going to get this information or learn about this? You know?
Right.
But I don't know. It's always been very interesting.
My experience has been, and this is just my own experience, so this is the way that I see the world, and I'm just talking about through my own lens, is that people who are very religious will have that mindset that people should not be queer or gay or whatever, however people want to term themselves. So just very curious to me that, and I guess I need to open up my eyes. Well, I am opening up my eyes to realizing that everyone doesn't think like me, but so it's just very interesting to me that someone who is not religious would still have a problem with someone being identified as queer or whatever.
Well, so I think it's like my mom is also, she's from the South too. And I think it was with a lot of things. I think she wanted to get at me, you know, because it was sort of like she was really hurt because I said some things about her, I guess, in my journal. Like, I don't remember what I said, of course. I still have that journal. Maybe I should look at it one day, but, and I think she was really hurt by that. And she couldn't talk about why I hurt her feelings, like what I said about her. So she turned it into that. Because at that time, it was like, that's wrong. You're sick.
Right.
There's something wrong with you. How dare, like, because she couldn't address.
Right.
Like, you said this about me, Cynthia. It hurt my feelings. And this is why. Like, she couldn't say that. So she lashed out at me at something that she knew I was insecure or I wasn't sure about, and made me feel bad about that, you know, to kind of like, I guess, even playing field, you know.
So it sounds like your mother and you had a very toxic relationship. And no, seriously, I mean, I'm not trying to, analyze. I'm just, yeah. And so that's really, actually very heartbreaking. But I think that it shows a pattern, and this is what we want to talk about. It shows a pattern. Okay, this trauma that you had about your own self-image, about the relationships you had with your mother, and so it develops into this dangerous addiction. And your drug of choice was alcohol. Is that right?
It was, and I mean, it's easy because it's just like having fun. I am a person like I would say, like, I would call myself awkward now, but I think at the time, like, I thought it as a bad thing. Now I'm just like, well, I find it endearing, so I roll with it, type of thing. But it's sort of like one of the things, but I think a lot. My mind is like going into 2 million directions at once. I'm like, I ask questions and I'm thinking about this. So for me, like, having that, like, getting introduced to that type of lifestyle and that type of thing was good. That could slow down because it's hard for me to sit still. I'm always like into different things. I'm always, and I was sort of like, well, no, I can kind of just chill, turn my mind off, and kind of be more in the moment, quote unquote, even though you're not, because you're doing something that takes you out of the moment. If you really think about it, you don't remember, 2, 3, 4, 5 drinks in. You don't remember anything really. You shouldn't. But you fool yourself saying like, oh, well, this is what everybody's doing, so I'm fine, and yeah, it was something that, and the thing about when it comes to like alcohol and things like that, it's like progressive. So a lot of people think, oh, if it's not bad at front, it's not going to be bad, but no, it stops and starts. You can be fine for years and then ramp up suddenly. You can, especially if a lot of things are happening to you in your day-to-day life and you just don't know how to process them correctly, and that's kind of what happened to me, like, throughout the course of my years since I've been legal, really, to drink. But of just like me going through things, whether it's like my career stuff, a lot of it had to do with like family and my romantic relationships, have been huge in that. But just me really feeling, but it had to do with me and just like how I saw myself and like how I couldn't say things or understand why I was feeling a certain way. So I would turn it inwards and blame myself. And then not be able to voice that and just really feeling like a horrible person or like I'm stupid or I'm ugly or like all this stuff that I would tell myself, like that loop over and over and over and over again. And then not being able to see any way out of it. But it's like you want it to stop. And like, I felt that going down that avenue was the only way I could get it to stop for a certain amount of time. But then it's sort of like, but then you keep chasing it, which is like the high, I guess. you keep chasing it. And like, the more that you do it, like with anything, the more it takes for you to like get that same result. But it's not the same, really. So, it's a never ending cycle, man.
Yeah. Now, you already started to feel some trauma, some stress in your life at age 10 or so when you were in fourth grade. When did you have your first drink, and when did you progress from there?
Gosh, I don't know. I didn't, maybe I had my first one when I was like 18 or 19. Like, I guess, but it wasn't that bad. I think I was very much a binge drinker. I did a lot of stuff, like stupid high school, college stuff type of thing. But then, when my mom passed away when I was 23, I had to do a lot of serious stuff because like my dad kind of fell apart, my brother fell apart. So I had to be really responsible at a young age, you know, and kind of keep the family together and sacrifice a lot of my own stuff to help the family, which, you know, wasn't necessarily on me to do, but I just felt like I should do it. And I made one promise to my mom about my brother. So that's another thing. But so I had my moments like in my 20s, but I was kind of really, really responsible then. And then I think when I was in my 30s, I moved to New York, my engagement broke up, and just reassessing my life. I was like, gained all this weight and just feeling unfulfilled across the board. Like I wasn't getting fulfilled from work, my relationship, myself. I didn't know anything about me at all. Like I couldn't probably tell you 5 good things about myself, you know, couldn't tell you what I wanted. I was existing, you know, and I think that's when I started really like getting into it. So maybe like in my early 30s, just because I just hated life. I mean, I'll just be honest about it. Like there was nothing I wanted to live for.
So was there any precipitating events around that time? Did you lose a job, or did you, I mean, you said your relationship broke up, but was that the only thing that really kind of sparked to where you started drinking more?
I mean, I feel like I moved to New York. I didn't really have any contacts or any friends, you know, so I think it was just feeling like I had to slow down for the first time in my life. And like I said earlier, I'm very much a go, go, go. Like I'm a runner, you know, like I run from my feelings, run from situations. Like that's kind of my MO at the end of the day. And like New York, when I first moved here, like I didn't know anybody. I didn't really have as much money. Like I kind of had to stop. I didn't have a job I could bury myself in because, you know, I can be a workaholic. I didn't have anywhere to go. So it was just me. And I didn't like anything that I was feeling or seeing. And then I didn't know what I was feeling because I didn't have any words for this. And then with my partner at the time, like our situations, it's been like I had to be the caretaker and always have to fix things and like all this stuff that I felt like nothing, like this is what I wanted my life to be. But at the same time, I didn't think I had the power to change it, you know, and I didn't know what exactly I would want to change. I just knew I didn't like it. It was like this, and I was depressed, you know. I got really depressed that year for like over a year. I was really, really depressed, but I didn't have like stable health insurance for a while, so I couldn't go to anyone. So I kind of just had a power through. And then my partner she wasn't really supportive. So I just felt bad about that. And then I felt like it was just a cycle, a lot of things. I think a lot of things were just swirling around and I didn't feel like there was any clear path out of it. So I think that's when I started really using the, like going down that road in order to keep myself numb as much as I could because, I had no other outlet to really turn to at that point.
Okay. So that's interesting. How did you know, and you talk about this in some episodes, so let's get into a little bit of that. How did you know that you actually had a problem?
I wouldn't say I had a problem. Like other people would say it was for me, but I was like, nah, I'm good. I think for me, a lot of it kind of came to a head last year for me. Cause I was going through like a lot. It was, of course, like my weight was really bad because I was out with a lot, because I'm social. So I would go out with my friends or go to the bar that I like to go to, and then get the drunk munchies, and then I would eat poorly at night and things like that. So the weight, I broke up with like my boyfriend earlier in that year, and it was a crazy thing. Not crazy, but it was toxic on both sides. It was, and then being kind of like attracted to someone else that didn't fit my MO, and like how that kind of impacted me. And I think that like that stuff happened on top of like I was in a job that I didn't really like, and dealing with my brother. My brother was my roommate for a while, but he has a lot of stuff like issues and things, but he doesn't know what to do with them, and he kind of projects. And I would hold a lot of his stuff because, you know, I felt like, well, someone has to do that. And I've always been like the supportive caretaker person in my family. So I think there was a lot of that happening. But I think for me, a lot of that stuff is happening. So the drinking and stuff ramped up, but I wasn't aware of it. But I think what really stopped me to really assess it was when I went to the doctor, and they're like, there's something with your liver. Like I had the flu or something like that. And I didn't really go to the hospital until like the very end because my fever wouldn't break. And I finally went to the hospital, and they ran all these tests on me. And the guy there was like, well, your liver enzymes are a little elevated. It's like kind of weird, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up having to go to my primary care doctor. And she's like, well, what's up with this? No, this is really weird for your age, for everything. Like, you need to have it. You need to have a sonogram. And I was like, okay, cool. And she's like, you can't drink. Like, you know, because she knew about like my drinking and stuff like that. You can't drink for 2 weeks before you have the sonogram. Like, you can't do it. And I was like, sure, that's not a big deal. And I will not lie, you know, that did not happen. You know, I basically probably drank every day up until the point I had to get my sonogram. So, and I think that was something that started like kind of symbolizing to me, or symbolizing or signaling to me that this is not just something, there's just no reason why I had to do that, you know.
Did you tell your doctor that you drank up until the sonogram?
Yeah, she knew.
Okay. Wow. I mean, obviously she had some words for you, right? I mean, it's completely...
Yeah. I mean, my doctor, my primary care, and my therapist, my primary care in particular, like she read me like up and down for like I don't know, she read me for filth that day. And, you know, I let her, and she's like, are you trying to kill yourself? Is this what you want to do? Like, she was like on it. And I was like, whoa, I'm not expecting this from primary care. You just want my copay, bill my insurance company, and then I go, you know, type of thing. And she wasn't like that at all. Like, she was like, look, you know, this is what we need to do. You need to be if you can't be accountable to yourself right now, then you're going to be accountable to me. And, you know, I really credit her and like my therapist and myself too on like last year, because the person that I am becoming now versus the person I was this time last year is like night and day. Like, I don't recognize that person. And I credit her a lot with that, because I needed someone to smack me in my head and be kind of like a mother to me, you know?
Now, do you think that that role that she took at that time, do you think that you were lacking that in your own relationship with your own mother when she was alive?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So, like, I would, I don't think I got any, like, that level of, like, care and support. Like, I didn't think my mom loved me or liked me or anything. Like, I think she loved me, but I didn't think she liked me or really knew what to do with me. Like, I wasn't nurtured, really. So, so that type of response from my doctor, I took notice of it. I was like, whoa, this is kind of, like, I needed someone to be like, what the heck are you doing? do you want, like, are you really trying to mess up your whole life? Is that what you really want to do right now? And it came at the time when I think I was questioning my own stuff too. So I was more open to hearing it, and
Right.
really being able to step outside of myself and my ego enough to be like, yeah, what I'm doing isn't helping me. It's not really helping my life. Like, I don't feel better because I'm doing this all the time. So what does that mean? So
Right.
that kind of like helped me go through the whole, like, let me really evaluate what I'm doing. Like, how much money I'm spending.
Now this is last year. This is going on, right? You said this is last year.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about. So your process out. You go from here. And you start on the process. You told a story, I think, in one of your podcasts that it was almost this year, or like almost a New Year's Day resolution, where you said you had 31 days to do something, and then
yeah.
What's that?
Sober January.
Yes, and that was just this past January, right?
Well, I did one last year too.
Okay,
but I kind of like white knuckled my way. I barely got through it.
Okay,
and then I blew it as soon as like February 1st happened. I was like, let's picking this back up.
Now, did you have a lot of stress at that time? What caused you to relapse?
I don't really see it as like a relapse. I wasn't trying to stop. I just did the 30 days it was sort of just like, I'm just taking a break,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't thinking about stopping.
I could quit anytime I want. I quit 10 times already.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, it's not a big deal. It's like, whatever.
Right.
But I just was like, I worked at a place at that time, different place than I'm working now, but it was just not a really good fit for me. There was a lot of stress there. And I think a lot of this was like my family stress, my relationship stress. Like, I had my boyfriend at that time, and he still isn't. He's not a great communicator. And he's not I don't know. I could go down. I don't know. I'm not him, but like, he's not a great communicator. And I would say back then I was also not a great communicator, especially when it comes to like my needs and wants and stuff. Like, I couldn't articulate that, and he wasn't able to articulate it. And his would show up in like anger, and like he would shut down and gaslight a lot. And then my mom used to do that, right? And when that happened, I would kind of panic and get all weird about it because it's my mom, and I was trying to appease her and jump through hoops and do all this stuff so I could feel like she was loving me. And I started doing the same things with him, and it's very interesting. Like, when you start really looking at your patterns and like map it back to like how you were raised and like how it kind of still shows up. But I was doing a lot of that stuff then because I just wasn't aware that that's what I was playing out was something from my childhood. And a lot of that stuff is happening around January, February of the first time I tried Sober January. So I was sort of like, crap, I'm tired. Like, February 1st happened, I was like, shoot, I'm tired of feeling all this. I'm tired of going through this.
So all the stress that you were dealing with just caused you to say F it and then to go back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did you struggle with any of your performance on the job? I mean, or were you pretty much functional?
I'm pretty much functional, but I mean, like I said, I work in advertising. Drinking is not a strange thing here.
Okay, I don't know anything about advertising. So are they all? They all? Is advertising pretty much?
It's like, you can have there's happy hours, there's whatever,
Okay.
So it's not like drinking. But no, I was never like sloppy at work or anything like that. I'm very professional.
And no issues or problems coming in late, staying, passing out, not missing deadlines and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. I'm very serious at work. Okay. Very serious.
Now, your drinking, would you go home and drink every single night, or is it just on the weekends, or? I
would say I would drink every day. Yeah.
When we say drink, we mean getting sloshed, drunk, however you would say it.
I don't know. Because it's like, I could tell you I was drinking every day. Could I tell you that I was getting like blackout drunk every day? No, I couldn't say that. I know it happened more than it should. I can tell you that. I know that I was typically a person who drank alone. I didn't really go out and do it a lot. I would sometimes, but not too much. But I would definitely be like at home, like weeknight, and it would be no thing for me to drink like, a bottle of wine by myself, in the span of like 2 hours or something.
Wow.
And yeah. And then over the weekend, sometimes I would just stay at home like the entire weekend and not really leave my apartment except to like, go to like the liquor store or something like that and come back.
And throughout all that, you had no clue that you had a problem.
No.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that in any type of judgmental type of thing. I'm trying to understand that, this is what a lot of people deal with. I mean, it doesn't matter who or what profession you are. I mean, people are subject to that. So,
well, you think about like, alcohol and alcohol use is so trivialized or normalized in our society. Like, no one thinks about it. You're just like, oh, and then the time you have friends that are probably in the same type of vein as you are. So you're just with them. So you don't think about like there's something odd. Because me at the time, like this time last year, I had like a regular bar I would go to. I would go with them, like people that would go to this bar, and they would drink like 7, 8, 9 drinks a night. And I would have like not that many. I'd be like, oh, they have a problem, not me. But I'm like, I'm still with them every day, know?
Right.
It's like, it's like this weird duality that you give yourself. But it's like, that type of stuff is normal. And then a lot of my friends at the time were people I met at bars. So we would just meet up and drink. And, so my life then, like I never thought about it because everyone I knew around me was doing it.
Right. So I want to get to some of the episodes, at least 2 episodes that you really discussed. I really found them fascinating. But before we talk about episodes from your podcast, I wanted to talk about because I'm really fascinated about this, how you defeated or how you beat or how you came out of that bulimic stage. Talk about that a little bit.
I mean, I'm one of these people. You're probably not going to like my answer, but I'm one of these people that I believe like I don't know if you could ever say you beat something like that, because it could come back and you're just not aware of it because it's just so built into like who you are as a person. I think for me, it's a coping mechanism. Like, and that's something that I just have to always constantly keep at the back of my head. That it's a coping mechanism. So it's like, if I find myself, because it can happen anywhere. Like I have to be cognizant even now in my day to day. Like if I'm bored, I'll start like snacking and eating something, but it's just boredom. But then if I'm angry, I could be like, well, I'm going to go eat this. Like I'm going to have like a fatty meal or something because I feel gross. I'm mad and I can't talk about that. So I'm just going to ingest that. And so it's like, a lot of how I do this stuff is that you have to be super self-aware, which isn't always fun. And then you also have to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
I was going to say you have to be super self-aware, but you also have to hold yourself accountable, which is another thing that isn't fun. And really sit there and think about it. Like, am I hungry right now? Or do I just want to eat that because it's there? Or I want to eat that because I'm angry. I want to eat that because I'm bored. I want to eat that because, and it's like, you have to really do that. And a lot of people like, you sit there and seriously do that. I'm like, yeah, sometimes I do. I'm like, yeah, I'm bored right now. And I just want that because it's there and I can have it and I don't have to pay for it. I don't want it. And it's sort of like, because my thing is with food. And then once I start really get triggered with food, everything else starts coming back, like wanting to work out, wanting to like the binging, the purging, all. So it's like, I just really have to take it day by day and really be self-aware, but keep myself honest. And that, like I said, it's not always fun.
Some people are very limited in their ability to do that, to hold themselves accountable. You are going to therapy as well as holding yourself accountable. Do you think the therapist and or the doctor that you talked about is helping you to hold yourself accountable?
I think my doctor, when she told me that day last year, I think it was in December or something of last year, November, December. And she's like, you're going to be accountable to me until you can learn to be accountable for yourself. Like that was like a turning point for me, because it's so funny because what I do for a living is like, I hold people accountable all day. That's like, I'm like, this is the task. This is what to do. This is what I expect. Like I hold people accountable today. like all day. But my own stuff, I'm like, whatever. So for her to put it on me, I was sort of just like, oh, okay. Well, but I was also at that point in time where it's like, my life isn't going the way that it's not serving me. Nothing I'm doing is serving me. So I need to try something different. And so I think I was just at that point, but I think her stepping up the way that she did, because I would say, I don't know how many doctors would do that. I'm my therapist. And I have two really close best friends. One in particular, I've known her for years since I was in college. And she and I talk straight to each other, like all day. Like, there's no mincing of words. There's no, like, I don't want to hurt your feelings, because we know it's love at the end of the day, and she was like that with me. And she's like, I'm just very protective of you, but this is what I'm seeing. And for her to flag something like that, I was like, okay, I need to start really listening to these people, because it's different if it's just one person. So like within the span of a month, I have 3 people telling me the same thing. So I'm going to listen for once and try something different, because my way isn't working.
Right. So you talked about, on 2 episodes that I really kind of want to discuss very briefly, one is how guilt and shame impacts your life. You talked about a lot that you dealt with your mother. And so just talk a little bit about that episode and how guilt and shame I know it has a cyclical effect on people. I've actually studied that when I was going to school. So just talk a little bit about that. Yeah,
it's also so interesting, the things that you realize, I guess, in your head is clear when you start really looking at stuff. But guilt and shame, I feel like, it feeds into a lot of just like addictive or depressive, like any kind of behavior. Because, a lot of it's coping. You don't know what to do. You don't know what you don't know, And a lot of us, I feel like, especially in the Black community, is like, we're not raised with tools or anything to like handle stuff. We just know a lot of trauma, pain, not all, but like, there's a fair bit of it. Or we just don't know a positive way to handle it. So it kind of manifests in a lot of guilt and shame. And then within that, it can show up in people as like anger or sadness, depression, whatever. But for me, when I started really tackling my own stuff and seeing like I had a lot of guilt and shame about certain things, whether it was about my body, whether it was about it could have been outlining stuff about my sexual identity. It could have been like stuff about, feeling second best all the time. Like, I always say, well, my mom, I always felt like I was second best in my family, even though I was very smart, I was very independent, and I didn't need much. I wasn't as charismatic as my brother. So, and people thought he was easier to deal with than me because I was too whatever, and a lot of like guilt around not being like the perfect Potter, a lot of that. And I think when I really started to dissect a lot of just why I ended up in certain situations and why I coped the way that I did, I had to really address a lot of that stuff. And like for me, like, I couldn't address it with my mom because she's passed and she's been gone for years now. But, my dad surprisingly showed up and did it with me. And I didn't ask him to, he was just like, we're going to talk about all this, let's do it. He brought it up because he knew I was upset. And, and like I said on that episode and other ones, like I give my dad ultimate kudos for the rest of my life, because if you knew where he came from or comes from, you would never think he would have the like EQ to do that. And like I was thinking that he would never be able to meet me or try to meet me, but he did it, and I think that helped heal me. I think a lot of that, being able to voice things, being able to do it with a clear head, being able to say like, this is just what I saw growing up or I felt growing up. And like some of the stuff I was telling my dad, he's like, I never knew you felt that way. I wish I did, and it's like, or I could see where you were coming from and how you would feel that way. And I'm sorry. I wish I could have done things better. And it's just, being able to just be out and open and free with it kind of really helped me, like come to terms and like put a lot of those things to bed, you know, and get them out of my head. Because I feel like a lot of times, a lot of the guilt and the shame stays in your head. Like it stays in this loop over and over again. And you keep like playing out certain things, or it keeps showing up in certain ways because you think it's going to be different results this time, but it's not.
Right.
But then you get that added back into the story of why you're feeling guilt or shame. Like if you're second best,
Right.
you feel like you grab people that make you feel like you're second best. And then that story keeps growing and growing and growing. So it would be nice to be able just to speak on all of that with someone else that's not you.
Right.
But it also, and then be able to have a dialogue about that so you can kind of come to terms with it. I just held so many things in for so much of my life. Like it just didn't go anywhere. And I didn't know how to get rid of it. So that's why I coped in a very self-destructive manner.
Right.
And even in therapy, like it took me a long time to even talk there. Like my therapist says, like, you didn't really talk about anything for like the first year.
Wow. Wow.
And now I'm like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So guilt and shame is really, it really does present that cycle. As you know, as you're talking about, many people have this guilt and shame about whatever. They're a lot of times it comes from religion, but it can come from a number of other places where they feel that they are unworthy, they have body issues, and this is that shame and guilt and all that kind of stuff. And therefore they take to some destructive behavior, drugs, alcohol, sexual relationships. And then that guilt and shame returns upon them because they feel bad about what they've done. So therefore they self-medicate to get rid of the guilt and shame again. And therefore the cycle continues on until they come to the place to where you've actually broken the cycle and had a real good, positive conversation with your father and talked about all this stuff and kind of had I would say a cathartic kind of moment and got it all off your chest, you know? So that's really important.
I think actually a lot of that stuff, like my dad was key, but I did a lot of that work prior to even having this conversation with my dad. And I think a lot of it was for me. Like you have to get there for you. And I tell that to so many people about anything. Like you have to find your why. It can't be because of your family. It can't be because of your partner. It can't be because it's like it has to be for you because you have to sit in it. You know, no one else can. And it's not to really look at yourself. It's hard. And people don't want to do that. People don't want to admit that. Like you say, like even when I was going through it, before everything, and I started seeing the other side of it, I felt bad about myself, right? Like I felt horrible about myself, and I wasn't a good person. But someone asked me like, well, why do you think you're a horrible person? I wouldn't sit there and be like, well, for this, I did this when I was 14, or this when I was 20, I cheated, or whatever. Like I wouldn't be able to like do all that. You know, I just felt bad, you know? Right. But then to really understand why you are feeling bad, to really get into it. And that's when you have to sit there. You have to look at your actions, look on what it's based on, look into your history, like really look through it and dig deep into it. It's not fun. It is not fun.
It's not fun, not easy. Yeah.
It's not easy. And it's like, I tell people like 2019, I just can't tell you the last time I cried this much in a year. I can't. I used to pride myself on not crying at all. Like, oh, that's a badge of honor is not to cry, you know? And now it's like, cry over everything. And to me, it's like, it's almost liberating because it's like, I feel like I can feel things now. But shoot, like sitting with yourself, but after me sitting with myself, coming to terms with myself, it really starts with you first before you can even tackle dealing with your parents or your family or whatever. Like you have to really see who you truly are as a person, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you have to sit with it.
Right. So you tried another episode that you talked about was the whole AA thing. How did that go? Yep. Did that work, or is it effective? Are you still going, or what's up with that?
I did go. Not as frequent as I did when I first started. I still have a sponsor.
Wait, say that again?
And like I still have a sponsor.
Okay.
I still go. Not as frequent as I did at the beginning. But I still do go. I think I told about that in that episode. that it's all about what works for you. A lot of people feel that there's only one way to do things in life. And it could be about anything, which is actually a pet peeve of mine, but there's just one way to do it. And I think that kind of sets people up for failure, and that guilt gives them an element of guilt too, or shame about it, because they feel like, well, it doesn't work for me. Then if I mess up, then nothing's going to work for me, you know? So the same thing with that. I feel like if it works for you, then by all means do it. It's working for me right now, so I stick with it. But I'm also open to a lot of other different things. Like, I think therapy has been great for me. You know, it's been a godsend. I have a therapist who calls me on my stuff because I need that, you know.
Right.
And when it comes to getting clean and things like that, there's so much out there. You just have to research it and find what works, find what group or crew helps you. Like, I used to do online forums. I used to have therapy. I go to meetings. I do. It's like, it's not just one size fits all, and that's all I do. You know, it can work like that for some people, but for me, that's just not how I process information. So I try a little bit of everything, and and I keep doing what works the best for me in my journey.
Very nice. Very good. Good. So let's talk about your life today. You're going to therapy. You are a podcast host. You are writing. And so the future is bright. So tell us about what you're writing and what we can expect from the podcast in the future.
Oh, yeah. So I write a lot I'm currently working on writing. I write spec scripts for like TV and like features. A lot of it is based on historical things or parts of history, like whether it's like Vietnam or whatever, but it's usually told through the lens of a person of color, male or female, and just like little known facts about history that may not be well known. Like I'm a history person, and so I'm like all into that.
I'm sorry, you said you wrote this for TV?
TV and film. Like, yeah, I do.
Oh, has this been published? Have we seen any of this stuff, or can you talk about it?
No.
Oh. Okay.
That's what I'm working. That's like what I do on the side.
Okay. Are you trying to get it published or trying to get it released or on the Netflix or what?
I am trying to get it published. I'm trying to get it repped. I'm trying to do a lot of things.
Okay.
I've submitted to contests. I have it out to an agent right now. It's like things are in the works, but nothing in this game. It's like a waiting game, so they say.
Okay.
So I'm just like, all right, and you can't just go one way. So you have to try different ways. So I'm working on that. Podcast wise, I am looking to really connect with just people in the space. I really want to. I'm going to be starting to really connect with a lot of people of color, male and female, that either have a history of trauma or addiction or addictive backgrounds, and they feel comfortable coming onto the show and doing interviews about that. Just because I think I want to hear from different types of voices. I did an interview recently with she's Latina, but she had bulimia. So yeah, interview. I also interviewed another woman who IDs as lesbian now. She had a toxic relationship with her mother. So talking about that. I think I really want to try to have conversations around things that people may not feel so comfortable with, but not like in a controversial or like aggressive manner. Is this more of just like, this is part of life, you know? It's either, right. It may not touch you directly, but you probably know someone, you know? Exactly. And like, why don't we talk about these things? Why don't we work on healing instead of just keep pushing this stuff down and passing it on to generation to generation? Like, let's talk about it.
Well, let me ask you why, I mean, you said people of color, and I want my audience to be everyone, obviously, but so is there a reason that you want to reach out specifically to people of color? Why would that be?
I feel like we have a lot of intergenerational trauma, you know?
Okay.
I feel like I'm totally down with, and I have fans that are not people of color. totally open to that. Totally think it's great. But I also just feel like just for me, like, you know, I remember, like, I was that girl, like, I'm talking to someone that's like me. It feels like, you know, I just felt alone all my life. I didn't feel like I grew up in like in these arenas and these agencies or these like I stick out in some kind of way, whether I want to or not. And like, you know, feeling, and I feel like there's also so much healing we need to do within a lot of the POC, like a lot of the communities that are labeled POC, just because of just like how society has been towards us, you know. And I don't think we were afforded or given opportunities to learn how to cope in an easier or a more self-reflective manner, you know. It's now becoming a thing for especially Black women to talk about mental health and stuff like that. It's now becoming a thing.
Right.
But, you know, Black men, can we really say that's the case, you know?
Yeah.
But it's sort of, but if you look at what's happening, you know, with like incarceration and the police, it's like, obviously there's trauma. Like, why don't we talk about it? You know?
Right.
So I think just for me, because I see so many people within my own community and people that I'm close to battling it, I want to talk about it from that POV. Plus, as a Black woman, I mean, of course, I can speak to that easier than I can anything else. And I think that's the kind of, like, I really want to help, like, the POC community, like, start to think about what we need to heal. And that's just kind of, but if it grows outside of that, by all means, let's have it do it. But that's initially why I wanted to start, because I just felt like as someone going through what I was going through, I didn't see anyone like that in the space that I could relate to. So I was like, well, why don't I try?
Yeah. Okay. So I appreciate you coming on the show. You are certainly a positive role model to those who are going through stuff. I want to remind the audience that you're college educated. You started to develop your issues as far as excessive drinking post 30 years old. So to all those listeners out there who may be dealing with some trauma, some stress, look to Cynthia Wright for some inspiration. And thank you so much for coming on Captain Hunter's podcast. I enjoyed your story. Thank you so much for sharing it.
Thank you for having me on here. It was fun.
I'm glad. So we'll look to have you again soon and hear about next time. We'll talk about one of your books that's been published, or something that's some documentary for Netflix or something like that. We'll look forward to that.
You never know. I'm into all types of things, so that'd be great.
All right. So we'll have you on a bunch of times to talk about a bunch of different stuff. So all right. Thank you so much for being on Captain Hunter's podcast. Thank you so much. Once again, your podcast is called Getting Your Ish Together. Make sure you guys subscribe, share, and like it. That's it. Take care. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you once again to my special guest, Miss Cynthia Wright, host of Getting Your Ish Together podcast. Once again, it's available on Buzzsprout, Pandora, iTunes, SoundCloud. She's on Twitter with Getting Your Ish, GettingYoursh. That's her Twitter handle. It's also at Getting Your ISGH Together. And you can find her on Linktree and Getting Your Ish Together. That's, once again, it's SH*T together. Also, if you have a friend or family member who's dealing with some type of substance abuse, there's so many resources available out there, right? If you're dealing with it, if you have a job where you can call your employee assistance program, EAP, or some similar type of organization, make sure that you give them a call. Once again, the only way to true freedom from addiction is for you to recognize it for yourself and for you to take that step out there and do something about it. So this is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. That's samhsa.gov, samhsa.gov. Once again, you can call your EAP. You can also go to alcohol.org. That's helping an alcoholic, alcohol.org. And you can just Google this stuff, right? There's so many resources out there for people who are dealing with alcoholism, or you're dealing with other type of harder drug, or you're dealing with mental health, depression issues. So there's a lot of help out there, ladies and gentlemen. So make sure that you give those services a call. I'd like to thank once again from Miss Wright for being on the Captain Hunter's podcast. Please make sure that you check out her podcast, subscribe to it, like it, share it. Please make sure to support the podcast once again. Captain Hunter's podcast on Patreon at cptlhunter for Cash App, Venmo, for PayPal. That's financial support. Please make sure that you rate, subscribe, and that you share this episode and all other episodes. You can follow me on Instagram, cptlhunter. Twitter handle is at cptlhunter, Captain L Hunter. Just think about that. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, much love and peace.